Hi, I'm Richard Rogers, and I absolutely hope that you enjoy today's spiritual message. You know, we at Unity of Phoenix Spiritual Center are committed to helping people live better lives. We're going to provide you tools over and over, spiritual tools that allow you to live your best possible life. And if you want to leave a donation to continue to allow the work that we do to support other people just like you, we say thank you. Thank you for your generosity, because this ministry is committed to making the world a better place.
Okay, so how many of you really thought over the last couple of weeks it couldn't get any worse? Right? Like, really? So one of the things that is happening is our world is transforming, right? We are breaking from one model of life to another model of life, and in this process, it is messy, right? And then we woke up on Monday morning, or if you were going to bed late on Sunday night, there was this deep heartache, right? That, what are we doing? And there's this line where Paul says that he believes that we are here to equip the saints to do the work of ministry. In one of his letters, he says, that we are here to equip the saints to do the work of ministry. And that line has always kind of interested me, and what it means to equip people to live in this time of deep transformation. Because there's a part of us that just wants to, and maybe it's just me, there's a part of us that just wants to go numb, right? Don't look, don't feel, just keep your head down, do what you have to do, and don't engage with all the things that are going on in our world. But I don't know about you, but it doesn't seem to be working so well. Like you can't numb yourself down enough, right? There's too many things going on. There's too much transformation, and it's happening from every direction. So the question then becomes, is there another way? And I really believe that if we're going to equip the saints to do the work of ministry, if we're going to equip spiritual people to be a part of the transformation that we're in, one of the themes that we've come back to over and over again this year is that you have to be full. Like if you're a soul, and I believe you are, there's two things that I've been teaching over and over again this year. And sometimes I teach things and it's like months or weeks later when I go, oh. And I wish I was really smart enough to have planned that, right? Right, but sometimes Spirit has me like actually doing the work before I understand why the things are lining up this way. So one of the things I've been teaching this year is that the soul only does one of two things. It either expands or contracts, right? You've all heard, you go, yeah, Richard, expand, contract. We've heard it, we've been here, right? Expand, contract, right? And this idea that if the soul only does one of two things, it either expands or contracts, if we're going to be full, then we have to be doing those things on a regular basis that really fill us up, that cause us to expand. We have to be, whether it's in nature or in prayer or in community, you know, if it's in water, if it's in great music, whatever you do on a regular basis, you have to be responsible for making sure you're full. Because with all the stuff that's going on in the world right now, you being empty is not going to be helpful, right? Because emptiness leads to more anxiety, depression, fear. It just kind of freaks us out, and that's a spiritual term. I think they used it somewhere in the Old Testament, right? But it's discombobulating. Has anybody felt discombobulated over the last few weeks? It's discombobulated. If you're not full, it just expands the anxiety that we have in our life. So over and over again, to equip the saints to do the work of ministry, the saints have to be full. And that means you actually have to know what you need to get full. Because I don't think more hours of television is helping, right? Or more chocolate cake, or whatever the alternatives that you practice, you know, using to get full may not be the thing that is actually soul satisfying to you. So sometimes we're doing things to actually numb ourselves down instead of getting full. And what I really want you to see is that the time that we live in right now, I don't think we have that luxury of, we have to be full. to equip the saints to do the work of ministry, you have to be full. Because I guarantee that there are people in your life and in your world that actually need you to be full right now. They don't need you to be empty and barely hanging on and freaked out and overwhelmed. That's not helpful, right? We need to be full. So what I want to do over the next few weeks is really talk about what it takes for you to be full. And I've wanted to do a series on prayer and, coming back to this over and over again. And one of the things that I've picked for this week and next week is 2 of old spiritual pamphlets that are just pure genius, right? And sometimes when we read these things that we've read maybe 100 times before, we don't really appreciate how spiritual genius it is, right? So one of the things that I wanted to start with this time is The Golden Key by Emmett Fox. How many of you have read The Golden Key by Emmett Fox, right? Great. I want you to go find your copy, right? And I want you to get it out. I want you to read it. If you don't have your copy, for a couple bucks, they'll sell you one in the bookstore, because I made sure they had plenty of them in there. And the version that I have is 5 pages long. Like, you can read that 5 pages. I mean, it's little pages. It's tiny, right? There's no pictures. I'm sorry, but you can do this, right? And what I want us to do is really slow down, because for me that there are really 2 points of prayer, right? The first purpose of prayer is to really help you get focused. And most of us need help getting focused, especially when there's stuff going on in our life, stuff going on in our world. We have a tendency to go shotgun it. And one of the things prayer is really good at is helping us get laser clear about our desires, what's important to us, what we want, what we need, getting really laser clear on those things. The other thing that prayer does incredibly well, I think the best, is getting us filled up. The fundamental purpose of prayer is for you to put your soul in a place where Spirit gets to download into you the next level of good, the next operating system, the next thing. And so prayer is that thing that we do to get filled up again, to remember that we actually do believe in a God, that we believe that there is a power and presence greater than ourselves, that are greater than our personality and our ego, and that we're connected to that. We're an expression of that. In fact, we're created in the image and likeness of that. And in this little booklet, in this 5 pages, I just want to read the first 2 paragraphs. Scientific prayer will enable you to get yourself and anyone else out of the difficulties. It is the golden key to harmony and happiness. To those who have no acquaintance with this mighty power of existence, this may appear to be a rash claim, but we only need to give it a fair trial to prove that without a shadow of a doubt, it is true. You need not take my word for it. You simply need to try it. And then in the next sentence, he gives you this framework for why it works. 5 pages, right? 5, and there's a line in the preface where he says, if I could do it in 5 lines, I would, right? But he gives it in 5. So then he says the next thing, shoot the next first slide up there, will you guys? Nope, not that one. That one. He says, God is omnipotent, and we are God's image and likeness. See, this is where prayer starts. That God is. God is power. God is wisdom. God is love. God is peace. God is, right? And we are in the image and likeness of that. That all prayer has to start from remembering and coming back to what God is. Because it doesn't make sense if when you're starting in prayer, if you don't start from the spiritual truth, that whatever God is, we are. True? right? So that God is infinite. God is peace. God is love. God is joy. And I'm created in the image and likeness of that I'm an expression of that. If God is wisdom, then I must be wise. If God is power, then I must be powerful. If God is love, then I must be loving. Because whatever God is, I am. True? And if we start from that premise, everything else makes sense. But you have to come back to the spiritual truth in prayer in such a way that you remind yourself of the right organizing principle. Has everybody had at least one wacky thought in their life? I mean, just one wacky thought, right? And if you've ever had a wacky thought, maybe wake up in the middle of the night with a wacky thought, and sometimes they get wacky and dark and weird. Maybe just mine. Maybe yours are, happiness and rainbows all the time, and unicorns dancing and all that stuff, right? But the problem is when you get a wacky thought, if you follow it too far, it just gets wackier. True? It doesn't usually loop around to sanity, right? When we're in self-doubt, it doesn't invert itself back into faith. It's when we start on a wacky thought, if the longer we follow that wacky thought, it just tends to spread out into higher and higher degrees of wackiness. True? Right? So starting our prayer life from wackiness, and again, that's another spiritual term, right? Starting our life from wackiness is not really the most helpful thing. But coming back to spiritual truth is helpful. Because when you start with a spiritual assumption that is accurate and capital T truth, then where you go from that tends to be a much better place. So God is, I am. Will you say that with me? God is, I am. Whatever God is, I am. Together? Whatever God is, I am. Because I am created in the image and likeness of God. True? Because I am created in the image and likeness of God. Okay, let's go to slide number 2. Then he goes on to say, God is omnipotent, and we are created in the image and likeness and have dominion over all things. Okay? This is where it gets weird. Because most of us do not believe that we have dominion over all things. Most of us do not believe we have dominion over our own garage. Right? If you look at your garage, does it look like you have dominion over it? Right? So we have this concept, this spiritual concept that we're supposed to have dominion and mastery over all things, but nobody really believes that. We think we have dominion and mastery kind of over this little corner of life that we try to keep together. And what I want you to see tonight is that all healing, all transformation, everything in your life gets better when you take dominion and mastery over it. Well, Richard, I can't take dominion over this relationship. That person's a wacko. So how's it working when you don't take dominion? Well, I can't take dominion over my finances. They're just out of control. So how's that working for you, not taking dominion over your finances? What I want you to see is that you have been given dominion and mastery over everything, but you have to actually take it. Does that make sense? That just because you've been given dominion and mastery doesn't mean that you've actually taken responsibility for it. That you've actually taken and allowed that area of your life to be under your control, under the guidance and direction of God, giving it over to whatever you call your higher power, allowing yourself to actually do the things necessary to take dominion over and mastery over your life. Because I will tell you, your life doesn't work until you take dominion over it. And it's like, well, that's kind of scary. Because then I'd have to be responsible. And I don't want to be responsible for this mess. Then I can just blame my kids, my parents, my therapist. I can blame somebody because I don't want to take responsibility. I don't want to take dominion over this. And what I want you to see is what he gives us is a formula. God is, I am, but you have to take 100% dominion for everything in your life. That's where all healing comes from. That's where all abundance comes from. That's where all healing of our planet comes from. You cannot heal anything in your life until you take dominion over it. Now, I'm not talking about from the place of your ego. I'm not talking about that little control freak that you have within you that wants to take over everything in the universe, knowing that if you were king or queen for a day, that you could get everything. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about from a spiritual point of view. When your spirit, when the God in you takes dominion and mastery over your life, then things begin to change. But if you don't take dominion and mastery over it, then it never gets better. Can I tell you a story about my dad? I love my dad. Dad passed away 12 years ago now. He had the best looking backyard. He had a backyard that was so beautiful. You know what fuchsias are? You know, he had fuchsias covering the backyard. Beautiful backyard, fruit trees, beautiful backyard, beautiful backyard. Did I mention he had a beautiful backyard? He had a side yard that was a mess. True, Mom? Mom's here. Side yard mess. Right? Side yard is a mess. We had a pretty big side yard. It was at least 12 feet across, and it was the whole length of the house. And everything that we didn't know what to do with in the backyard, guess where it went? The side yard. Old lumber, junk, broken things. Oh, just throw it in the side yard, right? Right. So when it came to his backyard, did he take 100% dominion over the backyard? Was it beautiful because he took a 100% dominion over his backyard? Was his side yard a mess? Yes. Why? I just don't see it. Right? We just don't go there. We just kind of throw it in the side yard, and it'll just, the angels, the fairies, the gnomes, somebody is going to take care of this because we don't see it, right? And what I want you to see is I actually believe that you have your own side yard somewhere in your life. Right? You have your wood stack. You have your broken barbecues and old lumber and mason blocks that we didn't know what to do with after we finished this project. You have that area in your life where you just try not to see it. True? And what I want you to see is that's the area where I want you to take dominion and mastery. Because if you'll notice, it's not getting better on its own. That until you have the courage to go take dominion and mastery over those areas in your life, nothing changes. So it's easy to take dominion over the areas that are clean and neat and wonderful, and you like to show off to friends and have them over for a barbecue and say, oh, look at my beautiful fuchsias. Oh, no, don't go over there. You just stay right here, right? And so all of us have those places that we have allowed to not want to be 100% responsible for. And we even want to feel like a victim. Like, well, we didn't create that side yard. The neighbors must have thrown that junk there. That's not ours. Right? I am 100% responsible for everything in my life. Will you say that with me? I am 100% responsible for everything in my life. I take complete dominion over my life. Together, I take complete dominion over my life. One more time like we actually mean it. I take complete dominion over my life. And I want you to see that until we do that, as individuals and as a community, nothing changes. We just don't look over there. Oh, that 50 people just died, but we pretend like that's not really going on. Oh, yeah, Sandy Hook. Oh, yeah, those kids. Yeah. We just pretend that we don't see that. Because we don't want to fix it, or we don't want to have to really stay awake long enough to say that people are dying in our nation like in no other civilized country in the world. We have to own it. We have to take dominion over it before anything's going to change. that tonight we have to be willing to stay awake long enough for a transformation. Then Emmett Fox gave us 2 more. He said this: as for the actual method of how this golden key works, the fundamental thing is simplicity itself. All you have to, now this is going to sound weird, all you have to do is stop thinking about the difficulty, whatever it is, okay? Now, those two look like they're a contradiction, right? It looks like I'm saying to you, take 100% responsibility, but don't look at it, right? And at some level, that's exactly what I'm saying, right? Because what we tend to look at is the problem, not the answer, not the solution. We tend to look at what's wrong instead of where we could be, what the possibility could be. And so what he begins to say is, as for the actual method of how this golden key works, in its simplicity, you stop looking at the difficulty, whatever it is. So what I want you to see tonight is, how many of you know that you can be worriers? Right? Now, if you're a worrier, what are you looking at when you're worrying? Are you squarely looking at the problem? Right? And are you fretting and anxious and uneasy because you're staring at the problem? Right? Okay, so let's go to slide, oh, there it is. Let's go to slide in the next one, thanks. So we got to move the focus off the problem, the person, or the situation, right? Because that's a symptom of what? A bigger issue, a bigger possibility, right? We have to move the focus off of what we're staring at, because what we tend to stare at is just the problem. And if you stare at a problem long enough, does it usually get better? And my belief is no, because you're just focused on what's wrong. We actually have to move our focus to a higher possibility. And let's go to 4. And this is what he says. Stop thinking about the difficulty, whatever it is, and think about God instead. That is the complete rule. If you can only do this, the trouble, whatever it is, will disappear. It makes no difference what kind of trouble it is. It may be a big thing or a little thing. It may be a concern about your health, your finances, a lawsuit, a quarrel, an accident, anything that's conceivable. But whatever it is, stop thinking about it and put your thinking instead on God. And that's all you have to do. Now, does that sound overly simplistic? It does, right? But we are not doing it, right? So what if there's an area in your life that you know is not at the highest possibility? Can everybody think of at least one, right? Now, if you stare at that, it depresses you. True? Like if you go out and look at your garage, how long can you stay in your garage without being depressed? Right now, if you have a beautifully clean garage, if you got a great man cave out there, you know, you go out there and you go, man, this is just beautiful. Right? You go out there and you get happy. But if, like some of us, our garage is a mess, we go out there and we're out there 5 minutes and we're depressed. Oy vey, where'd I get all this stuff? Right? So right there, we move our focus off the problem and onto God. See, I think culturally, we are spending an exorbitant amount of time worrying, fretting, being upset, and not putting the focus on God. And what if tonight the simple thing was that instead of focusing on what's wrong, we focus on the highest possibility of what could be? Can you imagine that would give us a new solution? Right? That in God there's an answer that we haven't even thought of yet, that would move us from exactly where we are today to where we could be, to the next version of our world, the next version of your life, to the next version of your health, to the next version of your finances, to the next version of everything in your life. If we move the focus off the problem and put it clearly on God, can you imagine that we'd actually move in a godly direction toward a greater level of good? And then he gives us, give me the 5th one. He says, this golden key is simple. It is so simple, but of course not easy to turn. If every frightening or worrisome thought, if at first it may be difficult to get your thoughts away from the material thing, but by consistently repeating the state of absolute truth that there is no power but God. I am a child of God, filled with surroundings of peace and love, and that God is love, and guiding me and directing me. And so what he gives us then is this idea that as we're beginning to focus on God, when we move our focus off the problem, off the challenge, and begin to entertain the highest idea, to hold a statement of truth that makes a difference in our life. And I've got one there for you, and I'm going to invite you to say it with me. God in me blesses, prospers, and harmonizes everything in my life. Will you say that with me? God in me blesses, prospers, and harmonizes everything in my life. One more time, just for grins. God in me blesses, prospers, and harmonizes everything in my life. Okay, so here's what I want you to play with tonight. You ready for your homework? Your homework for tonight is that I want you to come back to spiritual truth. And the first thing I want you to come back to is God is and I am. That whatever God is, I am. And that I have dominion and mastery over everything. That you 100% have dominion and mastery over everything in your life. To the degree that you're willing to accept it. To the degree that you're willing to take that dominion and mastery, you have dominion and mastery over everything in your life. And the second thing I want us to really look at is that instead of looking at the problem, I want you to put the focus on God. And I want you to come up with one statement of truth. I don't care if it's mine, but I want you to have one statement of truth that every time you want to focus on how bad it is, or what's wrong with your life or your world or your family or your kids or your job, every time you want to focus on how dark and scary life is, that you come back to your spiritual truth. And you have a statement. God in me blesses, prospers, and harmonizes everything in my life. And I want you to see what begins to happen when you put that level of energy on God. See, if we stay in the conflict, what do we get more of? Conflict. If we move our vision higher, then we can actually create a world that works for everybody. And I know it sometimes looks in our society today that there's no answer. That there's no answer, that there's no way we can get from where we are today to a greater possibility, that we're stuck and locked in our points of view. Because everybody believes their point of view is right. So we have to take our view higher than our point of view, higher than somebody else's point of view. We have to take our point of view all the way to God. And begin to entertain the possibility that there's a third way. Not your way, not my way, but God's way. Let's say that together. God in me blesses, prospers, and harmonizes everything in my life. One more time. God in me blesses, prospers, and harmonizes everything in my life. Let's pray. And I invite you to open your mind, your heart, your soul to the activity of God that is right here, right now. Today we unleash this golden key, this master's key. That we know God. We know God. We know God intimately well. And we know that we are created in the image and likeness of God. And that we have dominion over life. That we've been given dominion from the beginning of time. And that in all the bumps and chaos and confusion in our world right now, as we are giving birth to the next version of life, we move our focus off the problem and onto God. that we might be divinely guided and blessed and directed in all things. That there are higher levels of answers than we've ever known before. That we don't get lost in the old dialogues and the old debates, but we move to a higher level of truth. And we know that in God there is an answer, always an answer. And we give thanks for that higher level of good. In the name and through the power of the living Christ, we give thanks. And so it is. Amen.